Hello, everybody. Welcome to the replay. If you're not here live, which you probably aren't, as we're just starting up, I'm going to recite Ribhu Gita from memory. It's actually 32 passages that I learned from Evolving Beyond Thought by Gary Weber. And there's a longer story about why exactly that I've memorized this text that I will save for the book that I'm writing about it. It was not the book that I expected was going to come out of me. I tend to write one a year, and all of a sudden this just took a different direction, and it's quite exciting and interesting. And there's a couple of considerations that are very interesting for the mnemonist or people using memory techniques to think about long-form memorization. It's certainly not something that is unusual in many cultures, but it is unusual in another amount of cultures where there's just no long-form memorization. So Hadi is here. Thanks for saying hello. If you are joining us, go ahead, hit the thumbs up. Let me know if you have thoughts, questions, you want to say hello. I always love to know where you all are from in the world. But oh, great to see you, Crone Woman Walking. And well, you know, I remember your name, but I'll protect your identity without knowing whether you want to be named personally. But always good to have someone from the Magnetic Mary Method family here. Anyway, it's a fairly long text, and it's interesting because I haven't recited it live on a live stream before. So I'll be closing my eyes and just going with it. And as I do it, I sometimes go into the memory palace, so to speak, go into the memory palace. Sometimes I don't really need to. And the odd time I'll somehow skip a thing and go back. I may be a little bit, I don't know, in a feeling of bliss or something like this. And in any case, sometimes I laugh as little things open up, little energies and so forth. One of my neighbors is smoking, so if I cough, that's probably why. But in any case, if you don't know the Ribhu Gita, it's a long text, a longer text in Sanskrit, and in Evolving Beyond Thought, Gary Weber extracted 32 verses. And well, here we go. It's very beautiful, by the way, although I can't say that my singing voice is anything remotely interesting or beautiful, but I do sing it a little bit, and with a bit more affectation than perhaps is due. But it just comes out as it comes out, and there are considerations about this pronunciation and so forth. So, for example, one of the challenges is that the only reference I have is Gary Weber's recording. And so I don't know why, like I don't feel really drawn to learn Sanskrit as such, but I feel very drawn to this. But there's not a whole lot of reference materials to hear it that I've discovered so far. So sometimes I'm pronouncing it different than I heard him pronounce it, and other times I'm influenced by a recording of the Upadesa Saram that I started to memorize. And why I started to memorize it is to give a bit of relief from this project, but also because I just generally felt drawn to memorizing that other text, although I only have 5 parts of it. But in any case, some observations of pronunciation have crept into my pronunciation of this or recitation of this, but ultimately I just don't know exactly how these things are supposed to be pronounced. And I just yesterday a book on Sanskrit came, and the author is claiming that they do know a lot about how that it is supposed to be pronounced, but there's a lot of tongue placement considerations, and so I just haven't jumped that deep into it. However, in something like this for a spiritual practice and so forth, I think it's true that the words matter, the sounds matter, pronunciation matters, but by the same token, the name of the game here is to let go of attachments. And so you could see a lot of people creating attachments around correct pronunciation and debates, and then somebody gets to get right about it because they know more about a different person about it and so forth. That's precisely what I'm trying to avoid, because there are so many things you can do in meditation practice that trap you in the same thing that you are trying to escape. And so, in any case, right or wrong, I'm just like pretty free about the pronunciation, and I'm happy with that. And it feels good to riff on it a little bit. So it may differ, and I'll update the description later with the link to Gary Weber's Recitation, so you can hear the difference. And if you know it all being translated, I'd love to have a link for that. I've searched around. I found some for others, but not this one in particular. So very, very interesting. Anyway, thank you if you're joining us now, and I will respond to any chats that you post after. And thumbs up, tell the robots that humans still care about information, because if we don't tell them, apparently they don't know. All right, so here we go. Oh, I'll also with my hands be doing this, but it'll probably be out of the screen. And I want to just get my pillow here a little bit. I'm sitting in cross-legged pose, which I normally do on this bench. But this is hand mudra is very simple. Also learned it from a video that Gary Weber did, which I highly recommend, and I'll link that down below after this session if you're watching the replay. So, Chittameva Mahadosham, Chittameva Hi Balakaha, Chittameva Mahatmayam, Chittameva Mahanasat, Chittameva Hi Mithya Atma, Chittam Shashavish Anavad, Chittam Nasti Sada Satyam, Chittam Vandya Kumeravat, Chittam Shunyam Nasandeha, Brahmeva Sakalam Jagat, Ameva Hi Chaitanyam, Ameva Hi Nirgunam, Maneva Hi Samsaram, Maneva Hi Mandalam, Maneva Hi Bandhatvam, Maneva Hi Patakam, Maneva Mahadukam, Maneva Sharirakam, Maneva Prapanchakyam, Maneva Kalebaram, Deyahamiti Sankalpaha, Hridaya Grantir Irita, Kalatrayapi Tanasti Sarvam Brahmeti Kevalam, Dehe Trayapi Bhavam Yatak Deha Janam Uchayate, Kalatrayapi Tanasti Sarvam Brahmeti Kevalam, Deha Miti Yad Bhavam, Sadasad Bhavam Eva Cha, Kalatrayapi Tanasti Sarvam Brahmeti Kevalam, Deyahamiti Sankalpaha, Tat Prapanchamiyo Chayate, Kalatrayapi Tanasti Sarvam Brahmeti Kevalam, Deyahamiti Sankalpaha, Tadeva Ajanam Uchayate, Kalatrayapi Tanasti Sarvam Brahmeti Kevalam, Deyahamiti Abudhi, Malinava Sanyuchayate, Kalatrayapi Tanasti Sarvam Brahmeti Kevalam, Deyahamiti Abudhi, Satyam Jiva Saeva Saha, Kalatrayapi Tanasti Sarvam Brahmeti Kevalam, Deyahamiti Sankalpaha, Mahanarakam Iritam, Kalatrayapi Tanasti Sarvam Brahmeti Kevalam, Deyahamiti Abudhi, Mana Aviti Nishitam, Kalatrayapi Tanasti Sarvam Brahmeti Kevalam, Deyahamiti Abudhi, Parachina Mitirite, Kalatrayapi Tanasti Sarvam Brahmeti Kevalam, Deyahamiti Adyanam, Sarvam Shoka itiratam kalatrayapitanosti sarvam brahmeti kevalam deyahimiti adyanam samsparshamiti kathyate kalatrayapitanosti sarvam brahmeti kevalam deyamiti abudhi tadeva marinam smrtam kalatrayapitanosti sarvam brahmeti kevalam deyamiti abudhi tadeva shobhanam smrtam kalatrayapitanosti sarvam brahmeti kevalam deyamiti abudhi mahapamiti smrtam kalatrayapitanosti sarvam brahmeti kevalam deyamiti abudhi tushtasavahi chashayate kalatrayapitanosti sarvam brahmeti kevalam deyamiti sankalpaha sarvadoshamiti smrtam kalatrayapitanosti sarvam brahmeti kevalam ameva hi guptatma ameva nirantaram anandam paramam manamidam drishyam na kinchana ameva param brahma ameva gurur guru anandam paramam manamidam drishyam na kinchana ameva akiladhara ameva sukhat sukham anandam paramam manamidam drishyam na kinchana ameva param jyoti ameva kila atmaka anandam paramam manamidam drishyam na kinchana ameva hi triptatma ameva hi nirguna anandam paramam manamidam drishyam na kinchana ameva hi purnatma ameva puratana anandam paramam manamidam drishyam na kinchana ameva hi shantatma ameva hi shashvata anandam paramam manamidam drishyam na kinchana ameva hi sarvatra ameva hi sustira anandam paramam manamidam drishyam na kinchana Atma janam param shastram Atma janam anupamam Atma janam pero yoga Atma janam paragati Atma janam chitam manasha Atma janam vimuktidam Atma janam Vyanasham Atma Janam Sukhavam Om. All right, everybody, that's that. 32 verses, provided I didn't skip one. I think I made one little error there, and there was one thing that I corrected on the way, which is part of the interesting issues with long-form text, multiple words repeating. Does it repeat here? Does it not repeat here? And so forth. But I think, I don't know, I have to go back and listen to the recording and see if I made a mistake. But that's neither here nor there. This is something I can imagine myself. I don't know what will happen, but I can imagine myself reciting this for a long time to come. And so it can be refined, and will be refined, and adding more. So, for example, the Upadesa Saram is already underway. Don't know how long exactly that will take. One of the interesting observations that I have for you, though, and I found this several times with memorizing this script, is that often the one where you feel like, I don't want to memorize that one, it has no meaning to me, takes on the most meaning and becomes the most something that really is deep inside of you and is touching and transformative. And so that's that lesson, again, back to what I was saying at the beginning, of letting go of attachments and so forth, because sometimes we're attached to our own resistance to things. So usually when I feel that I don't want to memorize this particular passage, then what I do is I just find the way to do it anyway, and realize that the resistance is some sort of attachment in and of itself. So let me know if you have any questions about this. I'll see what comes to my mind in terms of thinking through different aspects to it. But there's obviously a lot of it to think about, and a whole book to be written on the topic, obviously, which is nearly done, just putting in the final parts. But so Renee says it's okay to use your name. Okay, thank you, Renee. You're taking a break to sit down and do a memory palace. Excellent, that's great to hear. Physico is here. Hello, Dr. Metivier. Finally, you got live. Such a shame I cannot stay. Well, glad you could be here. Check out the replay if you like. And you say, keep doing good and staying magnetic. Amsal, thank you for saying hello, Amsal. Don't read Arabic, unfortunately. Small question, where do you live? I am living now in Brisbane. It's kind of a cloudy day, but it's still beautiful. Sindhu says, Gita used to be taught in Vedic schools in India, the Holy Gita. Thanks for that. Says that you love this session from India. Great. Well, I love that you're here from India. Renee says, nice. Natural Flow. Greetings, young Jedi. Well, haven't seen you for a while, Natural Flow. Thanks for saying hello. Good to have you here. Whether I'm a young Jedi or not, I don't know, but I sometimes resist the urge to call people Padawan. And having to resist that urge makes me think that I'm perhaps not so young, but who knows. Anyway, so let's talk about the Memory Palace itself. The Memory Palace starts in this room. It actually starts in that room, but that was because I made a sort of a critical error. I wasn't thinking of memorizing the whole thing at the time, and then I just wound up doing it. So I thought, I'll just try memorize one of these lines. Well, actually, to tell you the truth, I don't even remember that was my intention. I remember different things. There's competing things, and I talk about this in the book, actually, how that the story of how I came to do this isn't in itself suspect, because of how things get remembered. But Ben Fischel, who suggested I read Happiness Beyond Thought, he's been on a live stream with me before, and he's gonna come again, and I'm gonna ask him what his memory is of it, to sort of have more stuff. And this is the neat thing about memory, is that you actually can memorize things scientifically 100%. You either memorized it or you didn't, and recite it. And then that test of it is correct or it isn't correct plays out over time. You can test it again and again and again. But in the actual story of how things happened, that's very difficult. And there's something about telling stories that changes the actual location of the memory in your brain. It changes the neural networks. And so what's so interesting there is when we think about the ancient people and how that they memorized these long texts, we like to think that they were 100% accurate, but so much of the texts actually had mnemonics in them that would trigger close enough. And I don't know the Buddhist tradition very well, but I've read that the first council, a bunch of dudes showed up. They'd spent 45 years memorizing what the Buddha said. They show up, and like this other monk comes in and he says, well, that's fine, guys, but that's not how I remember it at all, and I'm gonna stick with it the way I remember it. And he was apparently just as good a mnemonist as the other people, but he just remembered it differently, and he was gonna stick with his way of memorizing it. And I think we need to really take a lesson from that whenever we get dogmatic about, the wording of this or that text, or any kind of dogmatism, is that memory is very, very suspect of what was said and so forth. And there may be deep structures that are true, and our iteration of them, our expression of them, our enunciation of them on the surface will always change. Jacques Lacan, the psychoanalyst, he always said, there's too many words for any patient to ever tell you the truth. So anyway, I'm just thinking, what exactly did happen there when I was first memorizing it? Because it was conflicting in my own other memory of how this whole adventure started. And it's very interesting to think about, and then have this layer of memory where you actually can memorize something 100% and know it's not going to change. Another thing that comes to mind is the movie Lost Highway. If you haven't seen it, at least watch the first half hour or so. There's a scene where the cops come to the house. There's been some unusual activity around the musician's house, and the cops ask him about why he doesn't have his security system on properly and his security cameras on properly. And he says, I never memorized the exact lines, but he says something to the effect, because I like to remember things the way I remember them, not exactly the way they happened. That might be the exact line. Anyway, it's very, very important, because not only do we have our stories changing every time we access them from memory, but we also have our desire, our intention, that changes how the stories get told. And yet we still have this ability to memorize verbatim things with 100% accuracy. So there's these conflicts. Anyway, Carolyn from Virginia says, oh, hi, Carolyn, good to see you as always. Did you use more than one memory palace? Well, that's what I was starting to answer here, and it's an interesting question, because in this case, I would say there are two or three, depending on how you want to count it. Amina is here from The Hague in Netherlands. Wow, I've actually seen that place. Good to see you, Amina. Thanks for saying hello. If you're joining us and you have questions, go ahead, pop in the chat box. Let me know where you are in the world. And let me answer Carolyn's question here. So yeah, we started there, and then for whatever reason, I can't quite remember the story of all this properly. But I went to this room, and technically that would be skipping stations, but it really isn't. Then I came here. So there is a line, there's a line, there's a line, there's a line. And then I go into the hallway, and then I go out the hallway, in front of the elevator, then in the elevator. Now sometimes with elevators, like, I know what floor I'm on now, and then I can just make a calculation, and I would just pretend as if each floor is a different station, macro station. But in this case, I just had the elevator one. I didn't want to like foggy the thing. And then so in the lobby right in front of the elevator is another part. Then there's some mirrors in the lobby there and some trees. Interesting thing, right? A lot of people say, well, what if things move around? What if things change? No big deal. They've changed the plants in there so many times in the last week. I just went down there. It doesn't disturb the fact that Dehe Ahamiti Yad Bhavam is right there. Like, it's just there. There's no sad asad, Bhavam Eva Cha. Like, it doesn't have anything to do with what's there. What matters is that you use it properly. You create the imagery with the station, and the furniture can move, no problems. Anyway, I go from there. There's another part in the lobby. Then I go to the front of the building. Then there's the bus stop. There's another part of the bus stop. Then there's like a corner across an intersection. Then is there really a bench there? I'm not sure. It's covered by an awning. But there either is or isn't a bench there. Yeah, I think there is. And there's the bench. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I just then go through the neighborhood. And I go in a square, and I basically wind up down exactly where Ben Fischel told me to read Happiness Beyond Thought by Gary Weber. So it's all very fitting how that it works. And I actually didn't have that as an intention. It just, that's where the journey ended. I don't use outdoor memory palaces very, very much. And so this made this more challenging than it needed to be, because I'm much better with indoor memory palaces. But I'm glad that I did it. And, if people come visit, we can walk around and I can show how these images hang in the air. Although, that's the problem too. And maybe you have some feedback here, because I don't remember all the images, but I want to give the examples of the images, so I might have to invent some or guess at what they most likely would have been. And I'm just wondering, to the extent to which that's even useful or helpful. Maybe we just need 3 examples that I really do remember, or the whole thing. Anyway, there were images for every single part, but they fade away. The way to think about it is like training wheels on a bicycle. Once you know how to ride the bike, you're very unlikely to go and put training wheels on again, unless you're a clown in a circus. And even then, you can do it sometimes just for fun. Like sometimes it's fun to revisit your images or to think what those images were. And then the other thing that happens is sometimes the images you create the first time aren't sufficient, and you need to go back and you need to say, hey, that wasn't strong enough. Like at the very end, Vimukti-dam, it was somehow in that sequence of 4, it was the weakest link there, and it was just Vimukti-dam, and I lost it for a time, and I had to actually look at the text again, and I was like, how could I have missed that? That's so obvious. It's Wim Wenders on a cow, and tea, sort of a tea bag, smacking a tea bag on the Hoover Dam, right? Vimukti-dam. But for whatever reason, it just wasn't strong enough. So I had to just go in, same imagery, but supercharge it, make it a little bit more like really hitting the Hoover Dam with a tea bag, and really Wim Wenders focusing on that particular figure. And then it's done. So it works. And ideally, the ideal thing is you don't need the images. The sooner you don't need the images, the actual more you're with the information, which is what you really want. You want the information. So that's, I hope that answers your question, Carolyn. But yeah, I would call it 2, maybe 3 memory palaces. And the reason why I would say 3 is because there's something about this part of the neighborhood over there that just felt like a transition enough to consider it its own unit. And generally blocking it out is good for recall rehearsal. Because when you block it out for recall rehearsal, then you're doing recall within designated areas. Although I didn't in this case like totally block it out with some great intention. I'm sort of thinking of this after the fact. But again, it was an unusual sort of memory palace thing to use outdoor journeys. But I'm glad that I did. And I highly encourage people to challenge yourself, because if you're not challenging yourself, you're not growing with the practice of memorization. Natural Flow says, especially if you're trying to memorize something that is very foreign to your mind, do you think that interacting with those things in a virtual environment and maybe even experiencing that way? Oh, sorry, I missed your first part. Let me go back. I'm thinking about buying VR glasses to create more memory palaces that I can interact with in real life. Have you tried this? I would imagine that virtual memory palaces would work the same way, especially if you were trying to memorize something that is very foreign to your mind. Do you think interacting with those things in a virtual environment and maybe experiencing that way? Great question. Was it Chris, Natural Flow? I think so. It's been so long since you've been here. I'd be curious if that is correct. If not, publicly shame me. Let's see. So there's a number of things to your question. First of all, oh yes, Chris, 6 months or so. Proof is in the pudding, people. You gotta love taking risks. Anyway, by the way, if you haven't seen that previous replay where I was memorizing Chinese lyrics live, that was a fun one. I almost blew that one. But in any case, oh, what a delight. What a delight. Imagine what fun it is. You can do it too. You can do it too. Like anybody who has these skills, just go and memorize all the names at a meeting and just feel that surrender that comes when you just go with names. Even with Chris, I wasn't 100% sure. I've met people in elevators and just been like, Thomas? And it's like, bam! I met this couple, again, Steve and Sharon, and I was so like uncertain of the Sharon, and it was just, it's almost like this interesting pain that is so fascinating to observe, as if anybody cares if you made a mistake, right? But we do care, and it's an interesting thing in our mind. It's an interesting thing in our mind. Anyway, Chris, the thing with virtual memory palaces is that they're all virtual anyway. So you're not wrong to wonder if there would be any difference. And why do I say that they're all virtual anyway? Well, your brain is a chemical structure, or a physical structure made of chemicals. A hard drive is a physical structure made of chemicals. And so the things that are created in there are virtual because they're in this box, so to speak. The computer is not aware of the virtual environment inside of it in the same sense that the jiva, the human, is aware of the creation inside of itself. Although most of us are also lacking in awareness of the virtual things that are inside of us. So let's make this more clear. I'm looking at a camera right now, an iPhone, and where is that iPhone, right? Well, literally, it's apparently in the world. It's apparently somewhere right around here. But it's actually virtually in my brain. It's in the chemicals of my brain. Everything that is appearing in consciousness right now is appearing virtually inside of a chemical bath. And that's happening for you as well. And it's not even entirely clear that you exist, right? But if you do exist, my existence is now happening only in one place, which is in that virtual reproduction in the chemical bath of your brain. And so this is where some of the ideas of non-duality and oneness and so forth get much easier to grasp, because each person just has a screen, and all the things that you experience are only experienceable by you, and everything that you experience, you are connected with at a deep chemical cellular level. And so that makes it much easier to understand these ideas that, the entire universe is in you. Well, of course it is. Where else would it be? It's virtually within you. So now when it comes to would a VR environment help you with memory techniques, the answer is I don't know. But my guess is only if you're good at using memory palaces, period, right? Because a virtual environment requires manipulation of a virtual environment, right? So why a memory palace based on a real location, in my experience, tends to be easier for me, has a lot to do with spatial memory, the fact that I don't have to recreate images in my mind, I don't have to spend mental energy on it. It's just, there's a bus stop down there, and I can build on it. I can build on the existing mental representation in my mind. Done. Virtual environment, okay, so now this is this room. I now have to build a relationship with that room, and then on top of that I have to build magnetic imagery, right? And so it's like extra work. That said, Idris Zogai was on the Magnetic Memory Method podcast recently. If you go and listen to that, he talks about a very, very powerful mnemonist who's able to use movies. And so, it's possible, and some people do it. Some people have a preference for it. So you want to go listen to that interview. And I've done other podcasts on the whole virtual memory palace thing. But you're not going to evade developing the skill. There's no getting around it. So I think that people who think that they're going to develop the skill may be right. They might be able to develop that skill that way if they haven't been able to develop it the way that the ancients had to do when virtual reality was not a thing, virtual reality headsets. But what they were doing was no less virtual. It just has the advantage of how that the brain has spatial memory as an existing resource, existing mental content that doesn't have to be created. And the number one advantage always is to not invent new things in your memory techniques, unless that's your preference, unless that's what you're good at. So it really, at the end of the day, is up to each individual and their practice. But I don't think we're going to put on a headset and suddenly get better, necessarily. So Chris says, I would literally put the headset on, go walk through a city, say using Google Maps or a famous hotel. Okay, so essentially, this is not what I understood about virtual reality in a VR headset. I thought you meant Yeah, well, there's somebody in the Magnetic Memory Method Mastermind named Adolfo, and he's had these glasses where he goes and he shared with us his videos of his memory palaces on campus and so on. And yeah, that's great. Like, you can go and capture all that stuff. Personally, I don't have a dog in the game, but I think if that works for you, great. To me, that would just be not the practice. That's not the practice. The practice is to just remember it and then use it as a memory palace as quickly as possible. What recording would do for me would mean that I now have this burden of a recorded data that I then needed to review, when the way that memory techniques work best for me in my experience and the way that I enjoy using them, I just go and remember the room, you know? And in remembering the room, I then have a room to work with. But then, like, the idea, basically I think people would be de-skilling themselves. They'd be de-skilling themselves with precisely the skill that you're looking for. So the skill is go into rooms, use them as memory palaces. A de-skilling initiative would be go into a room, walk around the streets, put on a headset, have a machine record it for me, then go and sit there and spend time, precious time, watching a replay and reconstructing something in your head that you could have just gotten the first time. And so the only thing that I will do to help strengthen the memory palace is just draw it out on paper. And one of the reasons for that is because it's part of strategizing the memory palace. And why do you want to strategize the memory palace? Because it'll save you time in the decision making, so you're not humming and hawing, well, what station will be next? And yeah, so look, I'm not the policeman of how you should use your memory techniques, but I think that most people will be seriously de-skilling themselves and evading, putting obstacles in front of them that do not get them the skill that they're looking for. But if that's not true, then that's just fine. And again, like Adolfo in the mastermind, he seems to really enjoy that, and it seems to be working for him. So who am I to say? Chris says, what I'm trying to say is not some recording, but rather I have infinite amounts of new rooms and cities available for new memory palaces. So I go to Venice and spend time in. I guess I'm not understanding what you're saying, Chris, because I don't understand what this would add other than the burden and the debt of having to watch footage, right? Infinite amounts of new rooms and cities available for new memory palaces. What is the advantage of putting on a headset and making recordings when you can actually just remember it? I can think of hotels right now and think exactly of how that journey went. Right there. I'm thinking of one in Manchester as we speak. Having a recording of it would in no way be advantageous in my practice. But I seem to recall that you are a mnemonist yourself, so go ahead. You don't need anybody's permission to go and do that. And Venice, certainly, although I've never been there, seems like a place with labyrinthian and vertiginous potential. So Chris says, in the new VR, I can visit places without leaving my place. But oh, I see what you're saying. Well, that, again, I think it's very, very clear. You're giving yourself the debt and the burden of having to memorize new locations. And you just wanted to see if you have an idea about this or tried it even. Yes, well, you try it every time you watch a movie. And sometimes I will use movie memory palaces. There's nothing about a VR headset that really would make it distinguishable other than the debt and the burden that it adds and the evasion from the real skill, quote unquote real skill. Other people have all these skills that are real to them as well. So I would just dive in and do what you want with that. But I think it's still an evasion, and here's why. Let's take a memory palace from a movie like The Matrix, for example. It's just the simple room where Morpheus, does the red pill, blue pill moment. Maybe this will be the blue pill, red pill moment for you, where, you can either try to find ways that are going to give you new skills, or you can just work with the fundamentals. There's no right or wrong. by the way. I'm sure Neo could have had just a very good life if he took the blue pill and went on his way, in ignorance of the Matrix and all that jazz. But that room is just very, very simple. Now imagine VR allowing me to go down the staircase, up the staircase, into the other room where they do all that stuff with him, and then into every single pod in the Matrix if I wanted. I could just fly around and all that sort of stuff. Great. That'd be great if this little VR thing was allowed you to navigate through a movie like The Matrix. But it's going to create a need to memorize things that could just easily have been in your memory anyway. And then you're going to have to recreate that in a way that you don't have to recreate when you've just seen it with your own eyes, right? So again, there are people who do it, and certainly there's probably some entrepreneur who will go and create VR experiences of Venice, and power to them if it works for people. I still think it's an evasion of the real skill, especially for learning. Because here's the thing about the person that Idris Zogai mentioned on the Magnetic Memory Method podcast. That person is a memory competitor, right? And that's different than memory for knowledge. So you've got to kind of think about like why you're memorizing, what that memory palace needs to do. And in your case, I believe there's a story or a theme of gambling, poker, and things like that. And I can only say, in that worldly concern where the stakes are high, you would be best served to have the most bulletproof memory palace under the sun. Whatever that is for you, we'll just make that happen. But I can almost certainly predict that for the average person, it's going to be the one that they saw with their own eyes. And the fulfillment that will come from that will come from whatever they actually do and can do, and do cheerfully. So, yeah, I think that it's just something that is of such little interest to me personally, but obviously something that can be explored, and others do. And I am always happy to feature them on the podcast. Sadiq says, hello. Hello, Sadiq. Good to meet you. Peter's here. Hello, Anthony. Good to hear from you again. I think I may have misspelled the title. You think I may have misspelled the title. Okay, well, we can fix that afterwards. Thanks for pointing that out. Misspellings are interesting. Magus is here. Haven't seen you for a while, Magus. Oh, yeah, well, we haven't seen you on a live stream, but we saw you yesterday. Thanks for pointing out. From Paris. All right, cool. So how are things going with, I know you're working with the DAO now, so how's that going? I was able to quote the DAO earlier today, which was awesome. Interesting text. I haven't memorized any of it, but it is interesting that you and I both have a similar initiative in memorizing these long texts. Sorry you missed the recitation, but you can go and watch the replay. Let me know, anybody, if you have thoughts or questions or comments. The last thing I would say about VR is, just go and work it. I think that there's so many advantages yet to be found, and certainly I have like this kind of feeling about it, but it's up to the individual to go and explore that and to find out what works for them. How I have thought about using VR is a little bit different, and I've talked about it with Tanzil Ali. A little tired here. I'm fasting today, but Tanzil and I talked about it. We came up with this sort of idea, and this is an interesting thing about memory being suspect, is that he doesn't quite remember that he actually gave me the idea, or he introduced it. And in my memory, he seems to think that it was my idea anyway, again, story memory and the actual memorization of verbatim are two different realms. So Peter's in Birmingham, Alabama. Wow, I really would love to visit Birmingham one of these days. So Magus says, it's funny because I also compare the various English versions with the French versions I'm memorizing. Okay, so you're memorizing it in French. That's interesting. Tina says, hello Tina. Tina says, I guess VR would be good for someone homebound. Yeah, I mean, that would be like a more valid use of it. I would just say, provided they actually have the skill in their own home. But again, I just observe myself and I see my sort of rankling about it, and then I just observe that it's there and remind myself, yeah, well, to each his own. To each his own. The thing to understand, I think, about it is that there's always sort of a pro and con to everything. And the thing that matters is your goal, your outcome. And so if it's not producing your outcome, it's absolutely worthless. Or maybe you don't know the worth of it yet because you haven't gotten to a point where you're going to look back and have insight and say, oh, well, that actually was profound. I have that all the time. You know, I think of times where it was just such a pain, such a struggle, such a terrible thing, and then you look back and it's like, no, that was perfect. That was exactly right, you know? And that's not to be mystical about it. It's just the way that it was. And you learn from it, and then you go on. And then you think about how maybe you can let go of it, or if you need to hold on to some of it, apply some of that to new things, and to have great new things emerge in life. So, yeah, pretty simple at the end of the day. But yeah, VR for homebound people, definitely. I mean, you could also think too about helping blind people experience space for use in memory techniques through echolocation efforts. So if you could, help them understand distance and perhaps velocity to reaching a distance, it could help them. But Jared Guzzins was on a live stream with me before, blind from birth. He runs from here to Canberra, and he's good. I don't know if he's doing it now or in the near future, or if it already happened. But he was going to Japan to run, completely without sight. And when he explained to me how he remembered, and you can go watch the replay, and we're going to have the audio on a podcast soon. When he talked about how he memorized, addresses and where things are, he just touched his arm to make it kinesthetic. So again, it's like this virtual thing. Well, his arm is existing and appearing in his consciousness virtually with touch. And that may be related to some of this in terms of just memory with Kirtan Kriya as a mudra. Kyle's here. Hello, Kyle. Good to see you. Hello, you say. In terms of memory palaces, can you make it work and still memorize a lot, even if you make a lot of mistakes as a beginner? Yeah, you need mistakes, Kyle. Definitely. Good question. So I made lots of mistakes. I may have made a mistake when I recited it now, which you may have missed. I don't know if you were here or not. But I think I miscalled one of the things. I don't know if I'm actually going to go and watch the replay. But when I was learning it, I made a mistake. I may have made two mistakes now that I think about it. So for example, there's one part there which, let me just do it. Dehamiti Yabudhi Malina Vasan Uchayate. And I, for a couple of times, I thought it was Savan, but it's Vasan. That may be a mistake that I made when I recited it here. I don't know, but it was a lesson. And I was just like, well, how did I get Savan there when it's clearly Vasan? And then I just think it changed the image, right? So mistakes are absolutely essential. And look, a lot of people, I guess they might not be aware of this, but the memory competitors, the memory athletes, they make tons of mistakes. it's point-based in many of the competitions. I don't know the ins and outs of every single memory competition, but you can make tons of mistakes on the day and still win. And, I don't have distinct memory of all the ins and outs of some of Alex Mullen's blog posts, but he talks about how he made mistakes that cost him in points, but made up for in a different discipline, and then he still won. But he could have easily not been the winner, as I recall, given some of the, the way things played out in the competition. And that's part of what a competition is. Myself, I'm not interested in competition as such, and I don't really compete with myself, but I always take the opportunity to learn from the mistake and just think, well, what was it that happened there? And what needs to change? And then what was the nature of the mistake? So miscalling a word is a particular mistake. Forgetting the word entirely, like I had with Vimuktidam. It was just, what was there? And I couldn't get it. Even though, as soon as I saw the word, all the imagery I had just came back. So in that case, it wasn't a wrong word. It was just the imagery not coming, which meant that the actual word was not in long-term memory yet. And there's all kinds of things that can happen. It's amazing, the wide range of potential mistakes, and each and every one of them is a beautiful opportunity to learn something. And if you don't learn from it, well, that's okay too. But you did have the opportunity, and so 20 years from now, you can learn from it if you remember it, which is why keeping things like a memory journal can be very, very profound and powerful for you. But in any case, if you have any specific questions about specific kinds of mistakes, feel free to pile them on. But I'm sure that we will have more mistakes to come. I mean, there's always a mistake just waiting to happen. And another just point about this is you got to have the courage to make them. Just allow it to happen. I've made them. It's very freeing to be willing to make them. I've made them in front of people. It's no big deal. It's no big deal. I just often say I'm a person who works on my memory, and I'm very fascinated with memory. And that actual acceptance, I don't know, I haven't done a numerical analysis, but I feel that acceptance of the being willing to make mistakes has improved everything dramatically, because I'm not tensed up. I don't need it to play out in a particular way. So I said earlier that what really matters are your goals and your outcomes, but at the same time, as important as goals and outcomes are, you also got to be willing to let it go. And this is an interesting thing in the Upadesa Saram that I've also memorized 5 pieces of. It's got sort of 2 components. It's got more than 2 components, but there's sort of the idea that you don't control the natures of reality, and you are forced to take action, and those actions will cause reactions, and so you got to just let go of the outcome. So I guess that's 3 components, and they play out differently in the text. But that's very freeing to know in life, but also in memory practice. And so keep that in mind. Just let go of the outcome. Have an outcome in mind, by all means. Have goals. Goals are really, really important. But be willing to let go of the outcome. Like, hey, I get on this live stream, and I'm just like, man, I might blow this completely. I'm going to recite all this from memory. But it's just like, I even sang a little bit of the Upadesa to remind myself that just letting go of outcomes is the most profoundly fulfilling thing you can do. And just be free. You're free because you couldn't control it anyway. Oh, and by the way, I don't know if Brunheimer is here, but thank you for your continued thoughts on free will. Because we talked a lot about free will on the free speech live stream that we did. And if you haven't seen that, you might want to check it out, because I don't know if the book is still free, but there's an opportunity there for you for a free book anyway, and something that could help you and all of society. All right, let's see here. Manuel says hello. Hello, Manuel. Thanks for saying hello. All of you, thank you when you say hello and let me know where you are in the world. Gonna catch up with these chats. X Bluebells. Tina says, I love that podcast with the blind runner. Right, his name's Jared Guzzins. And by the way, I often feel like I have to say, it's spelt Gerard, but it's pronounced Jared, because then people say, hey, you forgot his name. But it's just spelt Gerard, but it's pronounced Jared. I don't know why. I should ask. Anyway, very, very cool guy. And I made a memory mistake in that interview as well. A small one, but one nonetheless. Partly because I didn't actually memorize the thing that I was recalling, but in any case, so it happens. Magus says, how long are the Sanskrit variation texts you were learning? Can you give hints on the volume of memorizing you're planning? Like a page a day, a few sentences, whole chapters? Great question, thank you for that. Well, this was 32 verses. And if we add on the 5 that I have from the Upadesa, then now I have 37 verses, if my math, I've never been a mathematician, but I think that works out. How much am I planning? I'm not really planning at all. I just feel drawn to it. I feel like I'll probably eventually complete the Upadesa Saram. I'm very drawn to something called the Ashtavakra. I think that's what it's called, if memory serves. And I may memorize parts of it. Maybe I memorize the whole thing. I don't know. If I set a goal for it, then I'll allow that goal to be a pulling, shall we say, magnetic force towards completion. But I'm really not sure. Like, I feel very drawn to being this guy who has memorized all kinds of Sanskrit, but I don't feel like I want to be attached to being the guy who's drawn to memorizing all kinds of Sanskrit, if you know what I mean. But it may play out that way. We'll just see what happens. And if I set a goal for it, then we'll do it. I mean, certainly, if you think about just the kinds of memory demonstrations a person could do, the least commercial one on the planet would be Sanskrit, right? In terms of, wow, got to hear this guy memorize all this or recite all this stuff. So I would just be doing it for my own, because I'm called to do it. I really don't even know how to word it. Now, in terms of how much per day and so forth, generally, that is a question of each individual setting a goal for themselves. And I didn't want to do that with this. I just wanted to allow it to happen, because sometimes I found, like I talked earlier about like the texts that I was resistant to, or the segments I was resistant to. I found that once that I buckled down and memorized them, I wanted to sit with them for a while and really ponder them and enjoy them, let them steep before moving on. So it's not a race. I didn't have a deadline. I didn't announce to the world, hey, I'm going to have this done by a certain date. I didn't jump on a live stream immediately after having done it and being like, look at this great accomplishment. No, I just did it when I felt like it. For whatever reason, I was fasting this morning, and the idea came to me, you should go and recite that Ribhu Gita that you memorized. And then I just thought, well, I'll see if that happens or not, right? Didn't have to happen. I've got other things to do. But I just observed myself doing it, and then there it is. Now it appeared. And that's really just the way that things happen if you look at it. I think that you'd probably find in your awareness, I don't know, I don't have your awareness, but probably that's how things emerge as well. But if you wanted to set a daily goal of a phrase a day, that's really great. Do it. But don't resist sitting with a particular phrase over time and really steeping in it, really getting to know it before adding something more. And who knows, maybe speed Sanskrit is going to be a thing. Maybe I'll start the World Speed Sanskrit Memorization Championships. Who knows what's going to happen? I kind of doubt it. But there are all kinds of places where people memorize these scripts, and they do it in different ways. I can tell you this, though. I never would have memorized this without a memory palace and memory techniques. It's too much hard work. Too much hard work to do it with rote learning. Never would have happened. But to each person his own. What has ended up happening, though, is that I just see myself ordering more resources around this. So I got a book now. on Sanskrit, reading more about the grammar, the pronunciation. I got another book of just a compendium of Sanskrit words that are used in yoga. It's just very, very fulfilling to just spend time with it for whatever reason. Maybe I'll take a course. I found a course online. Maybe I won't. I don't know. But there is an image that comes to mind, to answer your question, of someone who's memorized a lot of stuff in this tradition. But I don't know if that is going to emerge, and I'm not going to push it or to do anything other than to let it emerge. There's a great bliss in that. I feel that I will stay with this text for sure, and work with it for a long time yet to come, because it's very, very rewarding. And I like the Upadesa Saram, and I'll probably complete it, but I don't know yet. Again, like the fourth section, I just thought, I don't need to memorize this. And then I did memorize it, and I was just like, wow, this is so amazing. Even though it's just like this technical note, about which kind of meditation is going to be the most effective, so to speak. And interestingly enough, this little hierarchy is sort of my habit stack in terms of how I meditate, starting with a physical thing, then doing a chanting thing, and then just meditating. So neat that it's there. But I didn't really observe just how powerful and profound it was until it was in memory. And that's always the thing. Whether it's a poem or a person's name, you notice it so much more when it's in your chemical bath. When it's deep inside of you, you change. Information changes you. It changes you, and it opens up new things, opens up new vistas, opens up new perspectives and potential ability to have new perspectives. It's that old thing, the more you know, the more you can know. So let me look back at your question for some more things. Yeah, I mean, basically, one of the things, and this is the neat thing, it kind of gets back to that free will question. I'm very grateful that Gary Weber put that together in Evolving Beyond Thought, because it makes it very easy to go through and memorize. And by memorizing it made me aware of something I hadn't really noticed in Happiness Beyond Thought, his previous book, which is that he has the text of the Upadesa Saram and some other things that I haven't memorized the names of yet, or memorized any of the text yet. But I'll see what happens if I do or not. And I really don't know. And I just don't feel like making a goal around it. But as a general rule of thumb, it's pretty easy to memorize 4 of these pieces in about 5 minutes or so, or 10 minutes, but it depends on the nature of it. And why that happens is because, and I've never looked at the Tao in any language other than English, and I've never seen it in French, but it does not seem to be a text that relies on repetition. But this particular text has a lot of repetition. So I haven't memorized nearly as much as it seems, because a lot of things repeat, or the variations are there. And so listening to it, it might not be apparent that a word is just a variation on a previous word, or just how much words are coming up. So there's a lot of it only had to be encoded once. And that would be different with verbatim text, where you might have to deal with repetitive words differently, with more rigor than other things. But it appears that Sanskrit was designed for memorization in some sense. And it appears that these texts were designed to be memorized. So they, in and of themselves, have little aids. And I still don't think I would ever have memorized it without memory techniques, but they do sort of have these aids. So we got lots of chats coming in. Let me catch you all. If you want to add more, by all means do. Manuel says, learning Hebrew thanks to you. Wow, that's great. Thank you for letting me know that. I spent my time with Hebrew, as you may know. When I did my PhD, I had a huge thing there with the classical languages, and I remember Saul very well. I remember Saul very well asking me, like, how do you pick this up? And I didn't even have nearly the refined practice that I do now. But to be honest, most of that is just completely lost to me because I didn't keep up with Hebrew. But the last time I was in Israel, it was pretty easy to memorize, different things, picked up different things along the way. Didn't become fluent in Hebrew or anything like that, but it's just fun, and people love it. And you love it more because you have some of the language in your mind. It changes your trips. I've been to places where I didn't raise a finger to learn any of the language there, and then I've been on ones where just memorizing a couple of things changes everything about the trip. It's beautiful. JunkTube 4000. Wow, what a cool name. What tricks do you do when you read nonfiction books that someone who doesn't know any memory techniques wouldn't use? Oh, well, that's a great one. So, memorizing where on a page and on what page specifically different things happen. I misspoke on an interview actually where I miscalled a page, but I was thinking of a different. Well, I don't know. A mistake is a mistake, but I was thinking of a different book and so page 75 came out, but there is something memorized on page 75 in a different book, but it was page 77. But that's the kind of thing that you can do. And how that works is if you have an image for every number, between 00 to 99 and beyond if you want, you can just make an image. So in this case, in Maps of Meaning, on page 77, my edition, and you can confuse yourself actually. So it's, but now I'm quite sure. It's page 75 is where, in my edition of Happiness Beyond Thought, the Upadesa Saram is introduced. And page 77 in Maps of Meaning is where he talks about nestic memory, episodic memory, and he gives this great little example of how Hamlet helped Freud have certain realizations. And it's a very, very powerful thing. And it's very, very, even if you later, like, the point of memorizing the page isn't to later brag about, hey, that's on page 75 or page 77. It's just so that you know you're more connected to it, and then you can find it in a book easier. You understand the layout of the book better. But the point is that also, because you have these images for each and every page, you have something to help you memorize the content on that page. So 77, for example, I had a teacher named Mr. Koch, and 7 in the major is K, or a hard C. I typically just, or a hard G for that matter, some people use it that way. So I just have Mr. Koch. And as you can imagine, as young people, we made all kinds of jokes about that name. And so he lends himself to memorizing the information on that page. Whereas, on another page, Jennifer Lopez as an image for 59. She is very useful for memorizing information on that page, and so on. So there's a trick for you, JunkTube. It's not really a trick, though. I don't really like the idea of thinking of them as tricks. If you don't have the fundamental skills, then you're not going to whip out the magic, So tips and stuff, people ask for tips a lot. There really are no tips unless you have the fundamentals. And the fundamentals really are the memory palace, the major method, and sitting down and practicing with information that improves your life. Ramon, thanks for being here. You ask, what are your thoughts on reality transurfing? New to me, my friend. Please let me know what reality transurfing means. Maybe I go get the laptop. All I have here is a cup. Normally I have the laptop. I could look up what you're talking about. I'm not going to break this to go get the laptop. Let me know what you mean by reality transurfing. Learning to let go, says Daryl, is this week's strongest lesson for me. You're so right. Thank you for that, Mages. Yeah, you've got to let go. I mean, it's a practice. And it's a wonderful thing. And I am much better at letting go because I've memorized these passages from the Upadesa, which are just like, hey, dude, you don't control the laws of reality anyway. So what are you doing punishing yourself for? You're punishing yourself for nothing. You weren't in control. I know it's hard for people to accept sometimes the free will thing. Again, thanks to Brunheimer for his thoughts on one of the previous live streams in the chat, in the discussion. It's just so patently obvious to any intellectually honest person that we don't have free will. There's no way of getting it. And if you fight to the death or even kick up a fuss, it's probably your ego that is struggling with the free will thing, because it's just not that difficult. And we just don't have it. It's not even desirable at the end of the day. What a horrible thing free will would be to have. X Bluebells Tina, I love your idea of being relaxed and be okay with your mistakes. I was kind of afraid of getting people's names wrong, so I won't say anything. Yeah, well, just encounter it, right? It's very powerful to just encounter your own fear and then just go with it. You can even just say, before you say a person's name, look, I'm a person who works on my memory, and I might not get this right, but go with it. Let me try. And then you're a bit freer from the consequence. That's something to do. Adam says, "Good day, Anthony. I'm in Bathurst." All right. Wow. Good to have you here. Thank you for saying hello. If you're joining us, make use of the chat. This is, of course, a public service to bring awareness to memory techniques around the world, mental literacy in general. Kyle says, "Great answer. I'm so slow at making creative associations for information. I'm trying to learn to the point where I feel like rogue memorization is easier. How do I keep up my motivation?" Thank you for that question, Kyle. So I'm not sure what you mean by rogue memorization, but just rapid memorization. The thing that helped me a lot was just with cards, playing cards. Why does it help? Well, because you're dealing with multiple levels of information. They're really understood to most people. You can lay them out in front of you. You can do short blasts. Rarely do I memorize a whole deck of cards. Just more than you would normally memorize. Like, if I didn't use memory techniques, I probably wouldn't even remember 3 cards, And I've done this with people. I've demonstrated memorizing cards in front of people, and usually you ask them, they won't remember 3, 4 cards. Quite frankly, as a magician, I know this. You're lucky if people remember the 1 card they picked. It's just like sort of pattern recognition that they go, oh yeah, that was it later. Oh, a miracle, amazed. But 13 cards I like, and I'll add more and so forth. But practicing with cards is a good one. And just associating throughout your day. So even if you're not memorizing something, just going through the moves to associate. Kind of like maybe you're not boxing, but you'll box a tree anyway, just to go through the moves, to keep yourself sharp, keep yourself fit. I don't recommend, boxing necessarily, but it's just an analogy. Analogies are sometimes dangerous, so don't go around punching trees. I was in a band with a guy one time, actually, who I think we couldn't play a concert or something because he went and punched a tree. I don't remember the exact story, but it was something like that. But yeah, just practice associating. You can watch movies and associate. This is like that. And I believe you're in the masterclass. I just, on the exercises page, uploaded a whole new course called Visualization Mastery. And it goes through making sure that your images are as robust as they could be, because you're accessing all of the modes of your memory. And so it's possible that you're not using enough of the modes. Every time that I'm struggling, it's almost always that I'm not using one of them, and I just got to go back and run through them. So that's there for you to learn more about, and then apply that to something like cards. Cards is the one thing that has 0 meaning that I think you should memorize for practice to help you. What else could be good? I mean, something like we're talking about today, a text that's meaningful for you in a philosophical or spiritual way. Maybe whatever would improve your life. Just have a daily practice, and you'll be motivated, because your question was about motivation. You'll be motivated simply because you get a great wow when you recalled things correctly. And that's it. If you're using the techniques well, you'll recall the information correctly. And all you need to do is keep doing that. And I mean, why I'm still at it after all these years is because there's this boom of great feeling after having memorized something and recalling it correctly. And even if there's a little mistake here and there, just who cares? There's so much that was right. And then you're getting this. And we know that in habit formation, this chemical myelin gets built up. There's some dopamine stuff, opioid receptors, and yada yada. I'm not a neuroscientist. I haven't learned all the ins and outs of it all, but it's quite well understood. Many books that you can read about it. James Clear, he was on the Magnetic Mary Method podcast. In his book Atomic Habits, he has a lot of the neuroscience there that you can read. It feels good. So that in and of itself should keep its motivation high. But it's the consistency. You've got to do it long enough and show up long enough in order for it to happen. If you're not consistent, you won't get these transformations. You won't get the neuroplastic transformations. You won't get the presence of these chemicals. And you'll have to start the engine again every time. So I remember, let me put it to you in a different way. Like, one of the reasons why we get bored in movies is because of scene changes, right? And so every time that a movie changes scenes, it has to start the engine on our interest again, unless there's a really good sound bridge or there's a segue or something like that. But it's particularly bad in theater because scene changes require time to pass before that they can, pull the curtain back and you see the new scene. All of your brain has now been in reset, and you need to switch the engine on, turn the engine on again. I think it was Saul Stein who talked about turning the engine on. But I also had a mentor, a writing mentor, who talked about turning the engine on also. And you don't want to do that in life in general when it comes to habits and keeping your motivation high. So if you're a sometimes memorizer, off and on memorizer, you're just making an uphill battle. It doesn't need to be there. But if you're consistent, day after day, you just show up and memorize something, anything, you don't have to turn the engine on every morning because you're humming along. You got cruising altitude. So I hope that helps you out. It is pretty clear in anything: meditation, swimming, running, walking, rock climbing, playing cards, whatever it is you are called to do. Motivation comes from doing. And here's another thing. Here's another innuendo here, or not an innuendo, a nuance. That's the word I want. Here's another nuance on this. You don't have to wait for motivation to get started. Motivation creates those chemicals. Or sorry, taking action takes those chemicals, and you'll get motivated. So 3 times a week, I go to the gym down there. Most of the time, I don't really feel that motivated. But 2-3 push-ups later, bam, we're on. And the rest of the workout is fine. If I was waiting for motivation, I got other things to do. Never go to the gym at all. No, you go knowing that diving in creates its own motivation. So consistency and not needing motivation. This relates to our thing about attachments. Don't get attached to the need to be motivated. Just dive in. Don't accept no. Now, obviously this is all paradoxical in our talk about the absence of free will, but I think that actually an act of will is possible. But you've got to be observant of yourself, and you've got to see where there's the possibility to be different and not follow the commands of this story or this need for motivation, because that's kind of a story. I don't feel motivated. You're already processing it in your mind. If you just say, well, motivation is not needed here, I'm going to go do it anyway. See what happens. Just see what happens when you tell yourself that. See what happens if you set a little reminder on your didgeridoo there, whatever you use, iPhone or the like, and says, go to the gym right now, or memorize something right now. And instead of actually acting or reacting, just see what happens. And see if you can just allow yourself to say, okay, I will. And then do it, and then see what happens. Or see what happens when you don't. Just study yourself. Science is beautiful. Science is beautiful. And that was what Brundtleiber said about his, or is one of the things he mentioned in his comment there on the free will issue, is that if you could be scientific and live without meaning. And I said in my response, no. It's precisely because people aren't living scientifically that they lack meaning. Science is the path to meaning in life. Peter says, I want to memorize the dictionary. What would I suggest? Or what would you suggest? Well, there's a guy named Dr. Yip. You can watch his video where he goes through there, so I would check that out. I've never memorized an entire dictionary, so obviously the first thing is to check out the dude who has. But I have done something like dictionary memorization in terms of lots of vocabulary. And so basically I would create a memory palace for every letter of the alphabet. And then I would just start memorizing those words on a page-by-page basis. Now, I don't have distinct recall of Dr. Yip's video, but I think he also knows the page number of every page in the dictionary, where the words are to be found. And so that's something you might consider depending on your skills with memory techniques. Because if you have a 00 to 99 or beyond, then you'll have a tool, you'll have like a bridging figure, as I call it already, to help you walk through that page. But there's many other ways to have bridging figures as well. So yeah, but in terms of language learning, what I've done when I've done it, and I love dictionaries for language learning, it drives me a little bit bonkers when I hear language learning gurus saying don't use dictionaries. Couldn't be farther from the truth. Dictionaries are wonderful. You learn so much about a language by working with a dictionary, especially if it's a monolingual dictionary. As soon as you're at that level, you just can benefit so much from dictionaries. So yeah, just in my case, just picking out the words that I'm most attracted to, that actually will have use, that I feel will actually make my life better, is great. And by life, language, speaking life. Now there's some pitfalls here and there because, for example, in German, I memorized lots of words that people don't use, or they would be regional and not used in the region I was in. But that just led to many fun adventures, like abgebaggert and simperlich and sichalen, for example. Sichalen, probably better pronounced that way. They're not just universally used in German. But I certainly enjoyed using them, and then I would just tell people, and I'd show them, there, it's in the dictionary. They go, oh, ich habe etwas gelernt. Like I've learned something about my own language, they would often tell me. So it's kind of neat. But I wouldn't just memorize every word on the page just because it was on the page. So I hope that helps you out, Peter. So Major says, I see what you mean, repetitions, because I have a good idea of Sanskrit because of phrases I had to use in Zazen meditation. Yeah. There's lots of beautiful little repetitions there, and they're neat. They present neat little challenges, and I love it. I love it. I love to memorize these long things. And then they manifest differently in different texts and so forth, and like I have done as much as I can to find different things being recited by people who know Sanskrit on the internet. And so I'll listen to Gary Weber's recitation, for example, but I'll hear it differently in a different one, like with the Upadesa Saram. So I don't distinctly recall exactly how he pronounces some things from the Upadesa, but if you listen to some of the one recording in particular, like it's pronounced quite differently than what he does, and it's probably a regional thing or whatever, but it comes differently to each mouth, and then I just have pleasure in changing it to the way I like it. So Karturagniya prapute phalam karma kim param karma tajadam. Well, that's one way of doing it, but I kind of like to do it tajadam. And that's because I sort of heard it that way somewhere along the line. And I do it both ways. And then the next one, Kritimaho dadao, Patana karanam, Phalamashashvatam, Gatini rodhakam. It's, I've heard it not dadao, but I've also heard it dado. And sometimes I sing it both ways, one way or the other. It's just, not a big deal. Kyle says, what would you say are your favorite writings to do with memory techniques aside from the obvious answers? Or what would you say are your favorite things to do with memory techniques aside from the obvious answers like learning new things or names? My favorite things to do with memory techniques? Well, obviously long passages from ancient texts. I like to memorize dates of things. I like to just memorize facts. I like to memorize the publication dates of books, which is again dates, but it's very specific there. And I always liked to do that, even before I used memory techniques. I liked to know the dates of things. And movies. I was a bit of a cinephile. I mean, I became a film studies professor for some time there, but even before that happened, or I knew it was going to happen, I used to work at Queen Video in Toronto, the legendary Queen Video. I worked on both Queen Street and on College Street, on Bloor Street. And I never did work on the one that I think was on College Street in Little Italy. And I was there, I visited it, but I don't think I ever worked there, because I don't think it existed. And yet, somehow, I have a feeling I did work there. In any case, I definitely worked at the one on Bloor and on Queen Street. And just a amazing thing to be able to say to people, oh right, that movie was from 1986. Classic, kind of showing off a little bit, of course, but that was a favorite thing to do as well. And just knowing facts about things, movies, production history stuff, trivia, but not trivia in a competitive sense. I've never gone to these trivia things. I've played with my friends. One of my friends has these things, I don't even know what you call it, Wii player or whatever. And when I visit him in Canada, we sometimes play Jeopardy. I'm not very good at it though, and part of it is because I'm not a competitive person, and I don't even try to win. But whatever. I like trivia as long as I'm not competing. May just asked, what's your way of memorizing the melody? No way. I may have an advantage having been a musician, but I didn't need to memorize it. It's just very clear. Dun 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 dun. Let's see here. Ni hao ma. How da? Just doing a little live stream here. I got some more questions, so I'll maybe carry on. Whoa, a cactus. Chongwen cactus, said Mashua. Whoa, that's a big one. Dua ro wo ju. Is that right? Dua ro wo ju. Oh, dua ro ju ru. Dua ro jo wu. So the Batman duo, duo ro, ju wu. Like jur as in Z-H-I. Ju wu. Alright. Duo wo. No, ro, ro. Ro. So duo ro, ju wu. So Batman, the bad duo, row your boat. Jur wu. The Wu-Tang Clan with a guy we know named Jurway. Okay. See how that goes. Cactus. Kyle asks, do you think you could memorize what you did every day for 1 year? I already forgot what I did some days last week. Oh, Kyle, I think that is, I don't know. I don't think it's possible, and I don't even think it's desirable. For example, think about the question this way: what you did. What does that mean? Like, what is it that we are actually memorizing? You could get into so much minutia of complete unimportance that it would drive you nuts, you know? Just defining what that means. That said, there is some research that Richard Wiseman has presented about memory related to daily journaling, and it suggested that you will generally have a better biographical memory if you journal. But to get down to the point of memorizing everything you did, why would you even want to do that? And if you do have an interesting reason, I'd love to know why. 老婆，给我水。Yeah, if you have a legitimate reason, I'd be very, very interested in what that is. But I can't see the reason. And then from a mnemonic perspective, you would need to translate it into information that could be memorized. So what would that mean? 谢谢. You came perfect timing. Yeah, you'd have to translate it. Like, basically, you have to translate it into semantic information so that it could then be translated into episodic memory, episodic information for use in memory techniques, when a lot of it was already episodic anyway, but so banal and so uninteresting that your rationale, your reason for memorizing it in the first place would have to be pretty profound to do. Another idea that comes to mind, though, is if you were going to do that, then a lot of planning would come in handy so that you didn't have much to memorize, right? So you just plan out your day, memorize your plan, and then you'd be done. You could memorize an entire year in advance if you would just stick to a plan. May just says, because Sanskrit chants are more in an Oriental music system, if I make no mistake, not the Occidental scales and intervals, do you learn the melodies by rote repetition? You better have memorized your anniversary or she'll use that cactus on you. Yeah, that's right. It's really our wedding song that I had better have memorized. 你问我爱你有多深，我爱你要几分。Oh, now we're getting mushy. 我的情也真，我的爱也真，月亮代表我的心。Okay, so how did I memorize the melody of that? I didn't do it by rote learning or anything. I don't learn melodies by rote learning. I don't know how to answer your question, actually, because I've never thought about it. It's a good question, but it's not by rote learning, that's for sure. There's a thing called memory reserve. I've been playing music maybe since I was 4 years old. So, and I've done a lot of not ear training as such, but listening to music, transcribing it from sound. I've done sight reading. When I was in band class, there was a sight reading competition. So I'm quite deep into music. I've played guitar, bass, banjo, sitar, a bit of piano, trombone, flute. I still play guitar almost every day. Play bass. I don't have a problem memorizing the way tunes go. And I suspect that a lot of people don't have a problem either, because there's this notion of the catchy tune, which is just remembered despite your best intentions. And so something like The Moon Represents My Heart, which is what I was just singing there in Chinese, it is like, I defy you not to memorize the tune. It's so beautiful and catchy. There's no special magic to it. Likewise with this tune for the Upadesa that's on the internet. Dun da dun da da dun da dun da da. Like, good luck not memorizing it. So Amsel says, you have a good voice. Oh, thank you for your kind words. Major says, no, it's okay, I get it. It's just that when you know intervals, perfect pitch like it becomes possible to encode any melody by a succession of intervals. Yeah, well, I know intervals, but I still don't think that intervals are necessary for a catchy tune to do its work. And you're right, it is interesting. Very interesting. Music is fascinating. I haven't done enough about music and memory. And we'll see what emerges in the future. The future always yet to come, or so it seems. All right, well, thank you everybody for joining us. If you have any last thoughts, questions, whatever. By the way, I think YouTube changed something with its algorithms, and now the times, some people said that the sound wasn't great in the replay, and I don't know what's going on with them. Always changing, optimizing. I would end with something Gary Weber says in Evolving Beyond Thought, or that is part of what I have understood that is being said there, is that it's possible the whole universe is just optimizing itself. And so we talked a lot about what happens when you make mistakes with your memory today, and mistakes are a means of optimizing. The mistakes are not to be a discouragement. They're not to be held as anything other than an opportunity to learn so you can optimize. And when we get frustrated with things like the internet, like people tell me, oh, the live stream wasn't working, the audio wasn't great, it's blah, 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 this, that, and the other thing, I just see that as, well, the internet is changing and something was going on, the airwave, this, that, or the other thing. But what a miracle that we're able to do this at all anyway, right? What a miracle. What an amazing thing. And the whole universe is, perhaps, I'm not sure I go along with this entirely, but perhaps it's optimizing itself. And we're just, like, the question is, like, if it's optimizing itself, to what end, right? That's where I get a little bit like, yeah, maybe. But it's just becoming whatever it will become. This is in Exodus. Gary Weber points this out somewhere. Exodus, and I knew it also myself from my Hebrew studies and biblical studies in my PhD. Moses goes to the desert, and the word there is Abba. I'm becoming that which I will become. This is, yeah, you know, Moses asks, who's this dude? Who are you? What are you? All this sort of thing. Abba. I am becoming that which I will become. And so are we all, in a larger thing that is becoming whatever it will become. No one can say more or less about it than that. We have lots of cool science, and science is neat because it has means of verifying good ideas, preserving them, bringing them forward until new evidence, helps us get rid of them. And maybe we sometimes get rid of the wrong good ideas that need to come back. Or maybe we get rid of some of the bad ideas that just need to be gotten rid of, period. Who knows? It's not going to be something that happens without its bumps, that's for sure. And if the whole universe is becoming that which it will become, isn't it amazing that we get to observe part of that ride? And it's entirely possible that we've always been observing it. Maybe we forgot some of the things that we observed. Doesn't really matter, does it? Because whatever is here now, so long as you're able to observe it, to be aware of that act of observation and the profound miracle it is, the mystery that it is, then you're probably ahead of the game, because you're not in the suffering. You're not trapped up in it. Maybe part of you is. Maybe some of you is getting ground up in the gears of the great optimization of becoming whatever it will become. But if part of you is just aware of awareness itself, you can take great solace in that and experience great relief, great freedom. And memory, for me, has been a great way of doing that and accelerating the process of being much less caught up in the jaws. Samsara, I heard it translated as the jaws of the crocodile, and the mandalum, the circles. You don't have to be so caught up in it. Even if you are caught up in it, in the world, in this apparent world here, you can be free. And memory is a cool tool, because it just in the day, as the day goes by, sometimes these things happen, and I just think of these lines from what I've memorized from the Ribhu Gita, and they remind me that there's an awareness of all this that is free from what it's observing. And you can reside in that and allow things to play out without getting so involved in it. And karma, apparently forces you to be involved in it in one way or the other, but you also don't have to be involved in it at this other level. And you can actually not only identify that level, but you can grow your awareness of it and resolve into it. And that ego, in my experience, is still there, but it becomes a much more enjoyable and understandable thing and a forgivable thing. And it's nice. It's nice. So I highly recommend diving in, making sure you get evolving beyond thought. Maybe start with happiness beyond thought. At least that's the way I did it. And see what happens. I think you'll really enjoy it. Jenny's here, says, remembers every day, Art of Memory Forum. I would like to be able to remember every day that passes. Yeah, I read of somebody on that forum having that goal. Very cool. Yeah, I like Art of Memory Forum. We got a video that's being edited right now about different forums and discussion groups on the internet for memory. Definitely. We have a forum too, a little less underused, that makes no sense. A little less used at the moment, but I put it there, and people show up from time to time. So, but we're not focused on competition at all. And Major says, Jenny, every morning when you wake up, make sure your first thought action is to make your coming day as memorable as possible. That is great advice. Thank you for that. And I would say that if you're drawn in any way to memorizing some script, I found this one very, very rewarding. And I found it in Evolving Beyond Thought by Gary Weber. And it is really, really lovely to work with. And the other point that I didn't raise, that maybe I'll raise now, is that it's great practice to do it with distraction, I find. So maybe I'll just do it one more time before we say goodbye. And we'll have distraction here. We had it before. And it's cool. It's cool. It's cool to like stick with a text. It feels very good. And to have these things come into your awareness, but have the text itself enter awareness. Or, sorry, I lost my train of thought here. With the text, I didn't lose my train of thought. The text is going to enter awareness, but it'll be your guide back to your awareness, even if you get distracted. So now we got lunch being prepared, same old traffic noise. The sky has shown up. Ken, Lan Tien, Ba Yuan. You noticed that already, did you? That means blue sky, white clouds. All right, let's see. I hear these kids down there. Very beautiful landscape or soundscape in the world. Almost don't want to close my eyes because it's so beautiful to look at the sky. But often in my practice, I have my eyes open. Both work. Sometimes I'll open and look at the world. It's very fun. Get some water here. Chitameva mahadosham Chitameva hi balakaha, Chitameva mahatmayam, Chitameva mahanasad, Chitameva hi mithya atma, Chitam shashavi shanavad, Chitam nasti sada satyam, Chitam vandyaku miravad, Chitam shunyam nasandeha, Brahmeva sakalam jagat, Ameva hi chaitanyam, Ameva hi nirgunam, Maneva hi samsaram, Maneva hi mandalam, Maneva hi bandhatvam, Maneva hi patakam, Maneva mahadukam, Maneva sharirakam, Maneva prapanchakyam, Maneva kalebaram, Deamiti sankalpaha, Hridaya grantirita, Kalatraya pitanasti sarvam brahmeti kevalam, De traya pibhavam yatagdaya janam yuchayate, Kalatraya pitanasti sarvam brahmeti kevalam, De ahmiti yadbhavam, Sadasadbhavam eva cha, Kalatraya pitanasti sarvam brahmeti kevalam, De amiti sankalpaha, Tat prapanchamiho chayate, Kalatraya pitanasti sarvam brahmeti kevalam, De ahmiti sankalpaha, Tadeva ajanam yuchayate, Kalatraya pitanasti sarvam brahmeti kevalam, De ahmiti abudhi, malinavasan yuchayate, Kalatraya pitanasti sarvam brahmeti kevalam, De ahmiti abudhi, satyam jivasa evasaha, Kalatraya pitanasti sarvam brahmeti kevalam, De ahmiti sankalpaha, Mahanarakam iritam, Kalatraya pitanasti sarvam brahmeti kevalam, De ahmiti abudhi, manaviti nishitam, Kalatraya pitanasti sarvam brahmeti kevalam, De ahmiti abudhi, parachinamiti riyate, Kalatraya pitanasti sarvam brahmeti kevalam, De amiti adyanam, sarvam shoka itiratam, Kalatraya pitanasti sarvam brahmeti kevalam, De amiti adyanam, samsparshamiti kathyate, Kalatraya pitanasti sarvam brahmeti kevalam, De amiti abudhi, Tadeva marinam smrtam, Kalatraya pitanasti sarvam brahmeti kevalam, De amiti abudhi, Tadeva shobhanam smrtam, Kalatraya pitanasti sarvam brahmeti kevalam, De amiti abudhi, mahapamiti smrtam, Kalatraya pitanasti sarvam brahmeti kevalam, De amiti abudhi, tushtasaivahi chashayate, Kalatraya pitanasti sarvam brahmeti kevalam, De amiti sankalpaha, sarvadoshamiti smrtam, Kalatraya pitanasti sarvam brahmeti kevalam, Ameva hi gupta atma, Ameva nirantaram, Anandam paramam manamidam drishyam na kinchana, Ameva Param Brahma, Ameva Gurur Guru, Anandam Paramam Manamidam Drishyam Na Kinchana, Ameva Kiladhara, Ameva Sukhat Sukham, Anandam Paramam Manamidam Drishyam Na Kinchana, Ameva Param Jyoti, Ameva Akila Atmaka, Anandam Paramam Manamidam Drishyam Na Kinchana, Ameva Hi Triptatma, Ameva Hi Nirguna, Anandam Paramam Manamidam Drishyam Na Kinchana, Ameva Hi Purnatma, Ameva Puratana, Anandam Paramam Manamidam Drishyam Na Kinchana, Ameva Hi Shantatma, Ameva Hi Shashvata, Anandam Paramam Manamidam Drishyam Na Kinchana, Ameva Hi Sarvatra, Ameva Hi Sustira, Anandam Paramam Manamidam Drishyam Na Kinchana, Atma Janam Param Shastram, Atma Janam Anupamam, Atma Janam Paro Yoga, Atma Janam Paragati, Atma Janam Chitanasha, Atma Janam Vimuktidam, Atma Janam Vayanasham, Atma Janam Sukhavam, Om. All right, everybody. Probably some chats came in there, but I'll catch up with them at a different time. Thanks for being here. Until we have a chance to speak again, as I always like to say, keep yourself